This video is sponsored by Only Crits. Well, I got the baby back to sleep. Feels like it took forever. Like, I swear to God, it felt like that took a whole week. And it might have also felt like a while if you were watching these videos, because I guess we're still filming. I haven't turned off the camera since I got interrupted at the end of my last Critical Role Demystified video. And speaking of continuity and the impact of outside factors, when you're telling a continuous story like a D&D campaign, you might have some big evil villain you want to structure your campaign around. But you don't just want to spring this villain on your players with no warning. You want to draw it out, hype them up, lay the groundwork, and ramp up to a satisfying confrontation. And this is a topic I've been giving a lot of thought to recently for reasons. So today we're resuming my video series about structuring your campaign using examples from TV shows, and we're going to talk about how you can build up a bad guy in the shadows. Because if you want your players to feel the threat of your villain before actually encountering them in combat, you're going to want to treat your villains less like just a creature the players can fight, and more like a boogeyman your players are gradually learning about throughout several adventures. Now that sounds complicated, but thankfully we have a fantastic example we can reference and steal some techniques from for our own games. So today we're talking about Season 1 of the Marvel Netflix TV series Daredevil, and we're going to see how the show builds up its primary antagonist, Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin. And we'll talk about how we can borrow some of that same approach for our campaigns to help give our villains just a hint of that Vincent D'Onofrio aura. Plus, this is a nice way to sync up with the new season of Daredevil, since that's currently airing right now, since it's obviously early April, just like I said in my recent Demystified video. If you like this video and you want to help me make more videos like it, consider checking out the Patreon. Wizards of the Coast is going to be releasing the new SRD soon, and once they do, I'm going to start making some more D&D PDFs on my Patreon, making them compatible with the new edition. Oh, hold on. Oh. Okay, apparently the SRD already came out 3 weeks ago. It's the middle of May? When did that happen? Okay, well, anyway, let's talk about Daredevil. Wilson Fisk, aka the Kingpin of Crime, is Daredevil's arch-enemy from the comics, so we all knew he was going to be the primary antagonist in the show as well. And the series had him active right from the first episode. But you don't just want to cut to the Kingpin hanging out in his office doing Kingpin stuff. I'm an outlaw. Okay, I guess you could do that, but let's assume there's a better way to handle this. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love the 2003 Daredevil movie. I can't even begin to defend it. It's terrible, but I still love it. But there's definitely still some room for improvement in this idea, especially if we're looking at lessons we can apply to our own campaigns. Because you're probably not going to cut to the villain for an extended scene in your own game. Now, some of today's lessons do come from scenes where the show cut away to a villain or a group of villains, so we're still gonna have to abstract some of these ideas rather than lifting specific scenes and interactions. But I believe we can still examine these episodes and come away with some fun techniques of at least some broad strokes we can use to build up an important antagonist. When the series begins, Fisk is already one of the major crime bosses in Hell's Kitchen, and all the heads of all these local gangs are working together in a massive criminal enterprise. However, Fisk is unlike the other crime bosses in a few major ways. He's only communicating with the other criminals through intermediaries. That seems to be a recent development when the show begins, but it obviously helps build the suspense through the series. And he apparently insists his criminal collaborators should never even use his name, even though they all know it.
Tell Mr. We don't say his name.
Now, in my Dragon Week video, I also talked a bit about the benefits of your ultimate villain having a right-hand man who can meet the heroes at early levels, but it's relevant here as well, so I'm going to talk about it again. Because this is honestly one of my favorite tricks to pull as a game master. I like to think that I'm pretty good at building up villains in my games. I think a lot about what makes a good villain in a movie or a TV show or a comic book, and I'm able to transfer a lot of these techniques into my games to hype up my bad guys. But if you want to steal just one trick that will immediately elevate the villains in your campaign, it's this one. Give your bad guy a major domo, someone who can speak on their behalf and talk to the heroes at low levels and can essentially represent your villain long before you actually want the party to face the big bad in combat.
My master, Sauron the Great, bids thee welcome.
I am more than aware that you are not intimidated by me, Mr. Falcone, but you know who I'm working for.
Thanks for all you're doing, Mrs. Jones. Mr. Saxon will be very grateful.
The big man? Do I get to meet him? No one meets the big man.
And Wesley from Daredevil is my favorite type of henchman, because he's just a really polite guy who makes your skin crawl. He shows the heroes all the common courtesies, speaks eloquently, and never raises his voice. And yet what he's doing is absolutely sinister. And he's not even afraid to get his hands dirty himself if he has to. He's the perfect avatar to represent your villain before they actually enter the campaign themselves. And also, just because he doesn't raise his voice doesn't actually make him polite.
We're particular about our clientele.
Do they all end up working for you after you get them off for murder, or just the pretty ones?
Hey, fuck you, man, we like Karen. She ran an impromptu D&D game for the Punisher. She's cool, leave her alone. You can also use this type of henchman, the right-hand man, to add some interesting dimension to the villain. For example, we learn throughout the season that Wesley is Fisk's only friend. Fisk is fundamentally a very lonely man, and he cares about Wesley far more than your average villain cares about his cronies. Likewise, Wesley cares about Fisk, and is willing to go the extra mile to better serve him. This ends up being a major plot point at the end of the season when Wesley goes rogue and tries to take care of some business on his own because his boss just has too much going on and Wesley doesn't want to worry him. Now, you don't have to translate that specific dynamic to your game, but I do think if you're going to introduce a major domo type character into your campaign, it benefits you a lot to give them an interesting relationship with their master. Tom Hagen from The Godfather is a lot like Wesley, but he was literally raised by the Corleones, so his dynamic with Vito's three sons is a lot closer to that of another brother. On the other hand, if you replace Wesley with Harley Quinn, then not only do you have a very different representative of your villain running around and acting on their behalf, but you also have a very different, far more toxic dynamic between them. Or look at Darth Vader, who executes his master's will, but is also open to recruiting a new apprentice and overthrowing the Emperor if the right opportunity comes along. I don't want to spoil Curse of Strahd here, so I'll just say that one of Strahd's henchmen is, I think, intended to view Strahd in a similar way to how Wesley views Fisk, because the adventure says that if this character isn't already dead when the players defeat Strahd, then this henchman will confront the players shortly afterwards and try to slay them in the memory of his master. So if you're going to have a big bad in the shadows, even if their name isn't literally a secret like Fisk's, then I think it's a really good idea to introduce a henchman who can act as their representative in the campaign. Of course, Fisk's name is a secret. That's actually the other major thing Fisk has going for him: his anonymity. This is another great trick to steal for our own games, especially because it helps to separate the major arch-villain from the other enemies the players will encounter. Whenever Daredevil goes to confront one of the other gangs, it's not really that difficult for him to figure out who's in charge. He spends the first half of the season fighting the Russian mob, and the identities of the two brothers running the gang are never a major mystery he needs to solve. He just has to punch his way through their hierarchy until he finally comes face to face with them. When Daredevil eventually investigates the Chinese heroin trade in town, he meets that gang leader, Madame Gao, the first time he visits one of their hideouts. Partway through the season, he interrupts the Hand's activities, and only 2 episodes later, the Hand's local leader, Nobu, shows up to kill Daredevil himself. But whenever Daredevil tries to figure out anything about Fisk, criminals clam up and refuse to give him any information. Of course, the goal of a mystery in D&D isn't actually to hide things from your players, it's to give your players information in such a way that they feel like they had earned it, or that it was hard to get. We talked about this way back in the early episodes of Critical Role Demystified, but this is something that Matt Mercer is really good at when his players interrogate low-level bad guys. Matt plays these enemies as if they are confidently holding back information, but they're also accidentally letting details slip. Even if the information they're giving out isn't as significant as what the players are actually looking for, it's still important and useful information that benefits the players, and it makes them feel like they're making meaningful progress. And of course, Matt isn't actually leaking this information accidentally, he's very deliberately dropping breadcrumbs for the players to pick up on, while also holding back information that he wants to save for later. Now, Daredevil takes a slightly different approach. Early in Season 1, our hero brutally interrogates a low-level bad guy and manages to get him to give up Fisk's name. So there you go, the player character got the information he's been looking for. He knows the identity of the bad guy. Aside from the fact that Fisk's name isn't really enough information for Matt to do anything with, you also have the challenge of now making it feel like that information was really hard to get, even though it really wasn't. He just succeeded on an intimidation check. And so the criminal who gave up the information has to serve as an example of how important it is that nobody says Fisk's name. And so this guy has to take some drastic measures.
He'll find me and make an example. And then he'll find everyone I've ever cared about and do the same to them. So that no one ever does what I just did. You should have just killed me. You coward.
Holy Jesus! I forgot about that! Oh!
That's how serious this secret is. The villain of this week's adventure, a ruthless killer, is willing to take his own life rather than try to run from the man he just betrayed. Unlike some versions of the Kingpin storyline, some of the bad guys in Daredevil do know who Fisk is. They know his name, so he's not completely anonymous. But they're sworn to secrecy, and if they give up his name, they know it's better to be dead rather than face his wrath, because that's how much power and authority Fisk has. And weirdly, that might actually be more impressive than him being completely anonymous, because he wasn't working completely from the shadows. Instead, he was just doing his thing, mostly in the shadows, but everybody else just has to pretend they know nothing about him, or else. And they do it, because that's how much power he has over all the other criminals in New York City. Of course, if you're going to imply that your bad guy has a whole lot of power, you have to actually back that up, which means that your bad guy has to have agents out there, embedded in the halls of power, keeping your mastermind insulated from consequences. And honestly, this might have to be a whole other video someday, because it's honestly a trope I absolutely love.
When someone says we've got people everywhere, you expect it to be hyperbole. Lots of people say that. Florists use that expression. Doesn't mean that they've got somebody working for them inside the bloody room.
But season 1 of Daredevil actually has one of my favorite examples of demonstrating a conspiracy in action. See, eventually Matt puts enough pressure on the Russians that one of their low-level goons is actually willing to give up the Kingpin's name in order to get a better deal from the cops. And the moment he says Fisk, the two cops beat each other up so they can claim the criminal got loose, and then they start shouting that he got their gun, so they can be justified in using lethal force.
You really shouldn't have said his name.
Now, a moment like this could be a double-edged sword, and we'll talk about why in a minute. But first, let's talk about why I love this trope so much. First of all, it lets the players know that there's nobody in power that they can turn to for help because they can't trust the authorities. This is a problem that I feel like we're constantly struggling with whenever our players start dealing with higher-level threats. They always want to call in the reinforcements. After all, if this high-level bad guy is really such a big problem, surely everybody else in any position of authority will also want to drop everything to help solve it, right? And that's a whole big other topic that we can and will do a whole video about. But relevant to today's topic, when you introduce the conspiracy angle and you begin to suggest that the players can't trust everybody else, well, now they have a really good reason to be very careful with who they try to recruit to be their ally. This scene also leads to a follow-up later in the episode where Daredevil beats the hell out of that cop and demands to know how Fisk is connected to the Russians. And this just makes the cop laugh in his face, because it demonstrates that Daredevil really does have no idea about the scope of this conspiracy.
How are Fisk and the Russians connected?
You don't know? Oh, man. You really are one stupid son of a bitch, aren't you?
Again, this is something you want to do in moderation, but I love when the members of a conspiracy are pleasantly surprised to discover just how little the heroes have actually figured out about them. Probably my favorite version of this trope came in the movie Quantum of Solace, when our heroes interrogate a man about his mysterious organization, and the nature of their questions just makes him laugh in their faces.
But eventually you will tell us about the people you work with. And the longer it takes, the more painful we'll make it.
You really don't know anything about us.
But of course, there is a problem with trying to enforce the idea that your players can't trust anybody, which is that you can easily go too far and leave your players with severe trust issues. For a while there, every major storyline in Critical Role's first campaign, the Underdark, the Briarwoods, the Chroma Conclave, every one of them had a traitor character. Clarota was a rogue mind flayer the players trusted until he turned on them. Percy's sister had been in the Briarwoods' clutches for too long and was essentially suffering from Stockholm Syndrome. During the Chroma Conclave arc, one of Vox Machina's NPC allies in Whitestone turned out to be a shapeshifter in disguise. Twice. That happened twice. And it gave the party some pretty severe trust issues. It got so bad that one time, a character didn't betray them, and that just made them more nervous. And even after the campaign was over and Matt conclusively told them that they had nothing to worry about from that NPC, some of them still could not believe it, because they had just been burned too many times. That's why it's actually vital that Fisk's conspiracy is actually not that challenging to uncover. Throughout the rest of the season, Daredevil doesn't really face as many challenges as finding out who works for Fisk, outside of a few specific characters who are left ambiguous until the finale, like Ben Urich's editor at the New York Bulletin. For the most part, Matt spends the second half of the season closing in on the Kingpin, trying to find concrete proof of his wrongdoing so he can bring down Fisk and his whole criminal empire. But I honestly think you can get away with having a conspiracy that's relatively easy to unravel if you foreshadow the fact that the villains expect the heroes to be way further ahead than they are in unraveling it.
We are on the other side, thinking, oh, the MI6, the CIA, they're looking over our shoulders, they're listening to our conversations, and the truth is you don't even know we exist.
He's working with the Chinese.
You really don't know anything, do you? You're just snapping scraps falling from table.
Once you've established that your villains believe the heroes have already figured out a lot about them despite their precautions, it narratively serves the function of giving the players new information, but diegetically, it actually provides relief to the villains. They can actually become more confident during the interrogation scene, or however the information is transmitted to the players. Because now, despite whatever tactics the players are trying to take to intimidate this enemy, this low-level mook realizes that the heroes aren't nearly as dangerous as they might come across, especially given their reputation. It tells the players that their methods are working, and they are developing a reputation that has the bad guys worried about them. But it also tells them that they've just gotten lucky, and they shouldn't get too cocky. Anytime I see this moment in a movie or a show, I just get really excited for what it says about the dynamic between a villain and the hero. And that actually brings us to our next topic. Whenever we're discussing a big bad working in the shadows, one big question comes up. How can you make sure the heroes get a chance to interact with the villain in some way prior to the final showdown? A lot of stories don't do this, and that can be fine as long as there's some other source of pathos during the climax. For example, Luke Skywalker never interacts with the Emperor before the final fight, but that's okay because the finale isn't about Luke versus the Emperor. It's about Luke finding the good in his father. But that's very much the exception. Typically, you want the hero and the villain to interact in some meaningful way prior to their climactic confrontation. For example, in the first Spider-Man movie, Spider-Man and the Green Goblin fight, and then later, Green Goblin abducts Spider-Man, suggests an alliance, and shares his own philosophy.
You and I are not so different. In spite of everything you've done for them, eventually they will hate you. Why bother?
Because it's right.
Here's the real truth. Those teeming masses exist for the sole purpose of lifting the few exceptional people onto their shoulders. Imagine what we could accomplish together. What we could create.
And then, as the film goes on, they fight again, and we get the payoff from their earlier conversation, where now Spider-Man officially denies Green Goblin's offer to join him. And then in the third act, the Green Goblin figures out Spider-Man's true identity and starts terrorizing his loved ones, and things really ramp up a notch. If you haven't seen the first Spider-Man movie, go give it a watch, it's really good. But with an enigmatic big bad waiting in the wings, it's really hard to pull that off. The Daredevil movie gives Matt and Fisk a scene together, but neither of them knows each other's identities. Matt doesn't find out Fisk is the Kingpin until one scene before the finale, so watching them interact earlier in the film isn't really satisfying.
We only handle clients who are innocent. Nobody's innocent. Nobody.
But the TV show does a much better job of giving Daredevil and Fisk a really meaningful interaction before they ever come to blows.
Who is this? I think you know. You've been asking about me. Say your name. You first.
In episode 6, they finally speak for the first time over a walkie-talkie. This is the same technique we see used in the movie Die Hard or the Arkham Asylum video game, where the hero and the villain can communicate over the radio throughout the adventure. But unlike in those stories, Fisk and Daredevil don't talk throughout the entire episode or the entire season or whatever. They just have one scene. They only talk for about 5 minutes at this point. But that's still more than enough time for the two of them to size each other up, and for Fisk to start chipping away at Matt's ego and his sense of self.
You and I have a lot in common. We're nothing alike. That's what you'll tell yourself. Not that I don't admire what you're trying to do. To change the world. Nothing but desire in your own two hands. Secure in the knowledge that you're doing the right thing. The only thing. That's something that I do understand.
It's honestly an incredible scene, and I'm not going to be able to do it justice here. Go watch the show, it's a good show. But throughout the scene, Fisk explains his own mindset, offering us a glimpse at his own rationale for why he's doing what he's doing. He doesn't go into a whole lot of detail, but it's still enough to make it clear that he thinks he's the good guy.
I want to save this city, like you. Only on a scale that matters.
And there's also an opportunity for them to negotiate. Matt has something Fisk wants, and that's the entire reason for this conversation.
You've killed the Russian, and we'll call the night a push.
But also, that's kind of just a pretense, because really, this scene exists just so Fisk can get a bit of one-on-one time with the Man in the Mask, both diegetically for Fisk and in a meta sense talking about the structure of the season's storyline. That's the main purpose of this interaction. And throughout this scene, Matt is perpetually on the back foot. He's not able to come across as cool and intimidating as he wants.
I must worry you what he might tell me.
Which means he hasn't told you anything yet.
But also, Fisk just reads Matt for filth.
Life is not a fairy tale. You're a child playing at being a hero.
No, I'm not trying to be a hero. I'm just a guy that got fed up with men like you, and I decided to do something about it.
That's what makes you dangerous. It's not the mask. It's not the skills. It's your ideology.
The entire exchange leaves Matt shaken, but not because Fisk is some unknowable monster, but because he says a lot of things about Matt that Matt is worried might be true. And that's the beauty of a scene like this. Your villain can share their ideology, their perspective on the world, and they're not even just justifying their own behavior. As far as they're concerned, they've got no reason to prove themselves to anybody. They're utterly convinced in their own righteousness. But they do want to impart some wisdom on the hero by explaining how naive they are and how, if they were smart, they'd join the bad guy or give up their heroics or whatever it is the bad guy wants from them. And because they're speaking remotely, there's nothing the villain can do about it. Now, how you translate this dynamic into a D&D game is up to you. Maybe you use a speaking stone, like a Palantir. In fact, I'm pretty sure an interaction like this is exactly what drove Denethor insane in the Lord of the Rings books. But also, your villain could speak to your party through a sending spell, or through an avatar speaking on their behalf, like when Kavarn took over a Duergar's body in Vox Machina's Underdark arc. Or maybe the villain enters the player's dreams. That's what happened when I was a player in Curse of Strahd. Strahd came into my character's dreams, and we had a little negotiation. Or maybe the villain can just psychically communicate with the hero from a long distance away. We saw that happen at the end of The Empire Strikes Back and all throughout The Last Jedi. And neither of those were the first interaction with the villain, but they did allow the villain and the hero to keep talking without putting them together in a room for another brutal fight. Or maybe the player encounters an enchanted puppet that speaks with the villain's voice, and he's able to communicate with them from far, far away. And eventually the party will get fed up and they'll smash the puppet, but that won't actually change what the villain said. The point is, there are lots and lots of options. But you should absolutely take your villain just far enough out of the light that they can interact with the heroes. Now, that's not the last time Daredevil and Fisk interact before the final fight. Later in the same season, Matt goes to visit Fisk's girlfriend at her art gallery and winds up accidentally running into Fisk. And because Matt is there in his civilian identity, there's nothing he can do about it. So he just has to quickly leave the scene as soon as he can. Then they brawl again when Daredevil is already pretty badly injured after a tough fight, and Matt barely gets away with his life. But the point is, after this walkie-talkie one-on-one, they start having more interactions. In fact, the whole back half of the season is mostly about Matt and Fisk trying to make each other more and more desperate so they'll make a mistake. Fisk wants to make Daredevil angry enough to put himself into a dangerous situation he can't get out of, and Matt wants to drag Fisk's skeletons into the light so his veneer of respectability won't be able to protect him from criminal consequences anymore. And that tug of war lasts all the way to the season finale, where we get the frankly underwhelming final fight between the two of them. It's a great season of TV, and probably the worst part of the whole season is just how the stakes of that last fight are so low, because Matt has already succeeded in defeating Fisk in other ways. Thankfully, the series kept going, and if my memory serves me right, they were able to eventually provide a much more satisfying confrontation for the audience. But maybe we'll talk about the later seasons of Daredevil some other time. Honestly, I'm sure we could talk a lot more about all of Daredevil's various appearances in the MCU. Like, it kind of seems like he wears a different costume in every new project he appears in, depending on the tone of the show and where he is in his personal arc. And I think we all do the same thing on some level. We choose the accessories that make the most sense for our characters and capture their current vibe. I especially do that with dice. I have more dice sets than Matt Murdock has variant costumes. You can find your own fantastic selection of dice by checking out today's sponsor, Only Crits. In fact, if you wanted to, you could choose dice that are themed to the big bad of your campaign. For example, are you running an adventure where a vicious dragon is the ultimate villain? Then check out some of the metal dragon scale dice on Only Crits. Are you running a campaign where Vecna is pulling all the strings? Only Crits has their own line of liquid core eyeball dice. Are you running an adventure with a bunch of Slotty in it? Pick up a set of dice with little frogs inside each die. I've actually got my eye on the metal octopus tangle dice. They're really evocative. They make me want to play a seafaring campaign. Of course, rolling metal dice behind the screen always feels especially intense, so for the lighter moments of the campaign, I could swap out the metal dice and swap in a set of dice with little sailboats inside. Because, apparently, Only Crits has everything you could possibly be looking for. And if you visit onlycrits.com/supergeekmike and use the promo code SUPERGEEK at checkout, you'll be able to save 12% off of your order. Once again, that's onlycrits.com/supergeekmike and use the promo code SUPERGEEK. Thank you so much to Only Crits for sponsoring this video. Of course, throughout Season 1, Fisk has no idea Matt Murdock is secretly the Man in the Mask. And that's actually the fascinating thing about this season of Daredevil, because while Fisk is the big bad in the shadows for Matt Murdock and for the audience watching the show, Daredevil is the big bad in the shadows for Fisk and his fellow conspirators. And throughout the season, they talk about the Man in the Mask the same way Matt and his friends talk about the Kingpin. When we first see Fisk's criminal colleagues, some of them don't even believe the Man in the Mask is real.
Barrett and our men were attacked. Some Mudak in a black mask.
And you bought that?
The Russians have the most interactions with our hero early in the season, kidnapping a child to draw the masked man into a trap. In fact, they almost managed to kill him. But then he returns later that night, we get the epic hallway fight, and the Man in the Mask further cements his reputation as someone to take very seriously. In fact, just watch this scene, and imagine we didn't know the Russians were human traffickers beating up a woman to get information about a superhero. Just imagine what it must feel like for them to experience this moment.
Dave выключатель.
Yeah.
If you want to know his name, ask him yourself.
It's a tired joke to say that Batman and Daredevil have a lot in common, but also, it seems pretty clear they both know how to weaponize fear, and this just continues to add to the reputation of the Man in the Mask. In fact, his reputation starts causing tension between the criminal cabals, since the Russians seem incapable of taking down just one guy who's messing with their organization.
I mean, if he had an iron suit or a magic hammer, maybe that would explain why you keep getting your asses handed to you.
Once again, when Matt beats up that cop and asks about a connection between Fisk and the Russians, the cop is genuinely amused to discover that the notorious masked man doesn't actually have as much information as they all feared. However, at this point in the season, Fisk starts using the confusion and paranoia and anger caused by the Man in the Mask to shift the situation to his advantage. He's able to make sure the Russians are so focused on the vigilante that they don't even notice him dismantling their organization until it's too late. Obviously, I'm generalizing here, I'm skipping over a lot of pretty important scenes, but you get the idea. And ideally, anytime the villain and the hero have a cat and mouse dynamic, it works best if the hero is as mysterious to the villain as the villain is to the hero. The same dynamic is present in, of course, Die Hard. Hans Gruber has no idea who John McClane is for most of the movie, and so the two of them keep teasing more information out about each other as the night goes on. But that only works if there's some meaningful consequence to discovering that information. As John learns more about Hans, he becomes more and more skeptical about the terrorist veneer Hans is presenting to the cops, and starts putting more and more pieces together about Hans's final plan. But meanwhile, the more Hans learns about John, the more danger Hans poses to John's wife, Holly. This is not a major part of Daredevil Season 1 because Fisk doesn't find out anything about Matt's dual identity, but their dynamic definitely evolves in later seasons as Fisk discovers more information about Daredevil. But in Season 1, that threat is still present, and Fisk still has enough information to find a weak point to exploit to drive the masked man out into the open. When the Russians kidnap the child at the end of the first episode, they do it because they know the vigilante will find out about it, and they can set a trap for him. And later in the season, Fisk is able to use the murder of a specific member of the community to enrage Matt enough that he will fall into another trap. And thankfully, the writers don't repeat this trick more than twice in the same season, or it would get pretty old. But with the second example, it demonstrates how Fisk has figured out a lot of information about the Man in the Mask already, and he's able to exploit that information in order to push Matt over the edge. But honestly, we knew that was true from the walkie-talkie scene, because just by virtue of the fact that Matt runs around in a mask beating up criminals with his bare hands, that was enough for Fisk to get a really solid cold read on him. And our own villains can do the same thing. We can exploit the fact that we are game masters, and we know a lot more about the player characters than anyone else normally could. And we could use our insights to demonstrate how the villain has already sized up the heroes and is not impressed by them. And scenes like that can really highlight the philosophical difference between the villain and the heroes. These are some of the tools I use to make my villains really effective in my campaigns. When I run Strahd Von Zarovich, who, canonically, in the adventure, knows a lot about the heroes already, he's able to talk down to them, to deliver monologues in patronizing ways that do capitalize on genuine flaws in the characters, and exploit traumatic moments from their backstories. When I ran Prince of the Apocalypse, Yansi Bin, the Elemental Prince of Air, was able to have his "we're not so different, join me" scenes with the party's air genasi, using that force time method from The Last Jedi. It wasn't a deliberate reference, but I didn't mind the comparison. Rey's entire subplot from that movie is my favorite part of the entire sequel trilogy. All the stuff with Rey and Luke and Kylo and Snoke is all great. So when a player compared those scenes to something that my villain was doing, I was really pleased because that clearly meant that something was working. There's only one thing I don't like about that subplot, and it's never stated in the movies, but according to all the various Star Wars paratext, the name of the planet that Luke is on is Octo. Octu. Act 2. They named the planet Act 2. It's the planet where they're spending the second part of the trilogy, and they named it Act 2. And just like anything people don't like about The Last Jedi and Luke's storyline in it, it's actually a problem in The Force Awakens. Act 2. Jesus fucking Christ. Abrams, you can't just hang up a sign that says, "We are entering the second act of our story." Hello? I'm sorry I woke the baby. I hope you were able to get him back to sleep. I remember how hard it was to get him to sleep in the crib. What do you want? I thought that was clear. I want you to delete your channel. I tried to do this the nice way, but you just couldn't take the hint. I guess I forgot how stubborn you are. Is this the part where you say, "You and I are not so different"? Please. That's something the villain would say. And I'm not the villain here. You are. You cut my internet line. You set my dryer on fire. You came to my home with a gun and shot at me. Well, you destroyed my life. I'd say I was more than justified. What the hell are you talking about? You need to give up on being a YouTuber. Ignore the algorithm wizard, shut down the channel, go get a real job. I'm not gonna do that. You are. Because you're not gonna like what happens next if you don't. Don't threaten me. Don't ever come into my house again. It's not a threat, it's a warning. Because I've already seen what happens if you keep going. And so have you. It's already started. What is that supposed to mean? Seen a lot of friends lately? Playing a lot of games? Yeah, I did actually. I just played a game last week with some friends, in person. And all you had to do to make that happen was make half as many videos as you wanted, and completely drop the idea of doing weekly demystified videos. That happened because you blew up my dryer and popped my tires and fucked up my internet. If you were working a real job, none of that would have stopped you. I'm doing what I love. I'm perfectly happy with that. And you love it so much that you started a series where you talk about TV shows, and nearly every video gets demonetized. And they take so much extra editing you can barely get a video out a week. I'll manage. You can't even manage it now. It's mid-May. The dryer was delivered weeks ago. Daredevil Born Again is off the air. You made a promise of weekly demystified videos and then uploaded no videos for all of April. That was you. You being here must have caused some sort of time distortion. My timeline got decompressed somehow. No, that's not how it works. You might want to believe that. But the simple truth is you just couldn't handle the workload for a while. Do you think that's going to get easier? And what would your audience think if they knew that the real reason you can't get a video out on time is because you've picked up another job to make ends meet, working as a delivery driver for a massive, soulless corporation, the exact type of corporation you rail against in your videos. Your anti-capitalist message undercut by the fact that you need to put food on the table. They need to understand. Sometimes we have to do things we don't want to do to get through a rough patch. And you think that rough patch is about to end? You think this economy is going to allow you to keep making videos where you barely get paid? Do you think this channel is going to continue to be able to justify its own existence when you have to spend a month on a single video? It's time for you to face the facts. This ambitious video series has been a failure. This year, the channel barely made enough for you to pay half your bills. And that was back when you actually had the time to make videos. And you need to drive for a soulless corporation you hate, almost certainly serving as some sort of union-busting effort, just because it pays better than talking about games on the internet. It still beats working for a living. If that was true, I wouldn't be here. I don't make these videos for the money, but for the record, I still save a fortune on daycare by working from home. But it's not just the money that's the problem. It's time. You're being pulled in too many directions, and all you're doing is letting down everyone else. Your channel and your personal life are both full of broken promises. Patreon rewards unfulfilled, with videos and live streams and PDFs that you never delivered. D&D games canceled. Housework unfinished. Credit cards past due. Messages from friends left unread. You make your family watch the kid all day long, and you still can't deliver a video on time. There is no on time. I'm the one who sets my deadlines, and you can't even stick to them. You're doing a Daredevil video 2 months after the show premiered, so you're not capitalizing on the SEO. You barely get any videos out anymore. Your video essay channel hasn't uploaded in months. You don't send out newsletters. You dream of scaling up and doing more cool stuff, but you can't even deliver the basics people come to you for. You are a disappointment to everyone. Delete your channel. Get a real job. Put your kid in daycare. See him after work like the rest of the world. Or what? Or you will end up with nothing. In every sense of the word. I hope you do the right thing.
Don't listen to him.
You heard all that, huh?
Yeah. Look, he doesn't know what he's talking about.
He sure seemed to.
He wants you to fail. Don't listen.
Don't listen to what, Oddwick? To myself? You know he was right about all that.
Your audience loves your videos. And more than that, they genuinely care about you. When you weren't uploading, they were really and truly concerned for you. Sure, some of them just wanted more content, but a lot of them just wanted to make sure you were okay.
And
that means you're reaching people. You're connecting with them. It's not a parasocial thing. Your audience knows they don't really know you. They all know you have a lot more going on than you can ever really talk about in your videos. But your channel fostered a community that is compassionate and sympathetic. When you wrote your community posts talking about delaying videos, how many people came out of the woodwork to comment and say things like, "Take your time, family comes first, we'll be here." You're not letting people down. He just wants you to see the worst parts of this year. But it's like we talked about back in that Dalek video. You have to be kind to yourself.
I do want to make more videos.
And I can help with that stuff. We can get a demystified video out on the 22nd. We can start with that. And then the week after, we'll see what we can do. We'll get something out.
But the numbers... He was right. These big, ambitious videos are not really finding their audience. And I don't really have the opportunity to make a lot of videos about current events or recent releases.
You leave that to me. We'll find something for you to talk about soon that will bring more attention to the channel. For now, let's just focus on getting another video out on Thursday.
Okay. That sounds good. Thanks, Odwick.
Don't worry about it. We'll get through this together.
Yeah, I think maybe we will.
Also, you want to hear something cool? This is your 300th video on the channel.
Really? Wow, that's actually pretty awesome. And you know what? Obviously, a milestone makes a good time to thank my audience for sticking around, but even if this was not an anniversary, thank you. Genuinely, it means so much to me that I'm able to make these videos for an incredible audience. I've definitely thrown some weird videos your way from time to time, but y'all have truly been in my corner in such an incredible way, I honestly don't know how to say thank you. So, I guess I'll just say, new Demystified video coming on Thursday, May 22nd. This time for sure. And if you want to make sure you don't miss the video when it comes out, or any of my other videos, you know what to do. Subscribe to the channel, ring the bell so you get notified whenever I upload anything. Hit the like button and let YouTube know you liked it, and if you like this trilogy of connected videos, let me know in the comments below. And you know what? I'll spare you the rest of the usual call to action. I'll just say thank you again. And don't forget to comment, and so I know you made it to the end of the video, leave a comment that says, Happy 300. I'll know what it means. And if you missed my latest video, then this one was probably really confusing for you. It honestly would have helped if you gotten some sort of download of all the relevant information so you were caught up. And if you want to learn about how to do that in your own D&D games, check out my latest video all about how to handle recaps for our players. Until next time, play fair and have fun.